It's April 2nd of 2024, and two friends are meeting at Warnemount Park in Cudahy, Wisconsin, when they come across a horrifying sight. It's around 5:30 p.m., and they find a human leg, severed at the hip on the sandy beaches of Lake Michigan. These remains would lead police on a wild goose chase all around Milwaukee County, looking to solve a missing persons case and a murder. This is an ongoing case, and I try to find the most updated information for you guys, but the information is changing every day, and I will try to keep you guys updated as the story progresses. But let's get into it. I think it's kind of important that we talk about the community and culture of this city in Wisconsin, Milwaukee. I've actually lived in Milwaukee since 2021. And it's a very nice city for the most part. People are kind of like Midwestern, like nice and kind for the most part. But I think that's just important to note before we get into it, because this has kind of rocked not only the families involved in this story, but also the community as a whole. So now that we know just a little bit more about Milwaukee, let's get into the story. A short while after the remains were discovered, a 19-year-old woman named Sade Robinson was reported missing by her friend after Sade wasn't responding to her text and after she didn't show up for her shift at the Pizza Shuttle, which was a restaurant that she had worked at for 4 years. Her coworkers reported that this was very strange of Sade not to come into work because, like I said, she had worked there for a long time. She knew a lot of the customers by name, and she was just very well liked. The following day, a wellness check was conducted, and when they couldn't locate her, they decided that they would file a critical missing person report. Sheena Scarborough and Carlos Robinson had Sade in Mississippi, and then when Sade was 2 years old, she and her mother actually ended up moving to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Carlos ended up moving to Florida. And then throughout her childhood, Sade would kind of split her time between Florida and Milwaukee, but then in 2019, she permanently moved in with her mother in Milwaukee. After graduating from high school, Sade decided to attend Milwaukee Area Technical College and was set to get her associate's degree in criminal justice this coming May of 2024. And then after that, she was planning to join the Air Force. And during all of this time throughout her schooling, she had 2 jobs. Just before her disappearance, she had actually traveled to Jamaica, New Orleans, Atlanta, and it just seemed like not only was she super hardworking, but she was just adventurous and fun. And now the entire community, her friends, her family were looking for her. Around 7:40 in the morning on April 2nd of 2024, a woman called the police reporting that there was a 2020 Honda Civic on fire in the alley behind her home. She also reported that she believed that the fire was set deliberately because nothing else was on fire around the car, just the car itself. They did find some belongings in the trunk of this car that they later discovered were Sade's clothing, her phone, and her purse. Then on the evening of April 4th, police discovered a severed foot just about a block away from the car fire. And at this point, they determined that the severed leg and the foot were most likely from the same person. And this upgraded the case of the human remains from a suspicious death to a homicide. From that point until as recently as April 18th, police have been finding remains around the area of the car and along Lake Michigan and kind of all over Milwaukee. At this time, investigators were working tirelessly trying to find any information they could about Sade. Now that they had her phone, they could look at her phone records, her possible location, as well as look at any surveillance cameras around Milwaukee and use witness statements as well. And all of these evidence pieces led them to 33-year-old Maxwell Anderson. Anderson lived in South Milwaukee, Wisconsin with his 2 dogs. His neighbors described him as kind of quiet, kept to himself, but they did see him every once in a while when he was out walking his dogs. He worked in different bars around the area, more of like the downtown Milwaukee area. And at the time of these crimes, he was working at a place called Victor's Nightclub. And his boss said that he was well liked and was a pretty hard worker. But just because from the outside he seemed like a good person, didn't mean that Anderson was completely innocent, as he had quite a lengthy criminal record. In 2014, Anderson was charged with 2 misdemeanor counts of disorderly conduct after he got into a screaming match with one of his relatives. Anderson was actually living with this relative at the time, and she confronted him because she believed that he was under the influence of drugs and or alcohol. And this fight ended with Anderson stealing her car and driving it into the home's patio. And during the same encounter, a different relative ended up getting into a physical fight with Anderson, and this ended up with them getting their ribs broken. During the same year, Anderson was charged with his first DUI as well. And then in 2015, Anderson was living with a different set of relatives in Door County, Wisconsin. These relatives ended up confronting Anderson, being like, hey, you're not really following our house rules. Like, your area's not very clean. Can you just clean up your area? It's our house. It's our rules kind of thing. And Anderson got extremely mad and he started throwing things. He punched a hole in his wall. And when his relatives tried to call the police, he smashed their phones. He ended up pleading guilty to 3 misdemeanor counts of disorderly conduct, domestic abuse, and damage to property, and he was put on probation for a year. Then in 2019, he and a woman were in downtown Milwaukee when an argument broke out between the two of them. A random passerby decided to try to intervene and protect this woman because she seemed like she could be in some sort of danger. And then, without warning, Anderson just started beating this person up. For this offense, he was again charged with disorderly conduct and battery, although this charge was later dropped. And he was also sentenced to another year of probation, this time with random drug tests included, and he had to pay $7,000 of restitution to the random passerby that he just beat up, which I think is definitely fair. Then in 2022, he was charged with his second DUI when he was found going 70 in a 30-mile-per-hour zone, and he blew twice the legal limit on the breathalyzer, and he had an open container of alcohol in his car. Later that same year, he was caught driving with a suspended license, and during a probation hearing, he was caught having THC, cocaine, and alcohol in his system. By March of 2023, his probationary period was over, but it seems like throughout all of his criminal history, drugs and alcohol seem to play a factor in a lot of these crimes. But other than monitoring his drug and alcohol usage, it seems like he was never really treated for these conditions. Maxwell was pretty quickly named the main person of interest in Sade's case, and police were able to obtain a search warrant of his home. As of right now, we don't know everything that was found within Maxwell's home, but we do know that there was blood evidence found on Maxwell's bedding and on the stairwell leading to Maxwell's basement. And we also know that there were gasoline containers within his garage and storage space. Maxwell Anderson was officially taken into custody on April 4th of 2024 after the police were able to pull his car over during a routine stop. Then on April 9th of 2024, a hearing was held to see if police could hold Maxwell another 72 hours while they hurriedly tried to ID the body parts that were found and just try to gather any evidence to keep him behind bars. The judge did grant this extended 72-hour hold, and I think that this really helped in this case because the police had time to gather every piece of evidence that they possibly could and put it all into a criminal complaint to hold Anderson and make sure that he would not get out without being charged. A few days later, on April 12th, Anderson was officially charged with the murder of Sade Robinson. And not only this, but he was also charged with mutilating a corpse and arson. And at this time, we finally got a release of the criminal complaint made against Maxwell Anderson, and this gave us an extremely clear timeline of what the police believed happened to Sade. So this is everything we know so far about the events that led up to Sade Robinson's death. It appears that on March 1st of 2024, Sade and Maxwell planned to go on their first date together. The building secretary of Sade's apartment said that they talked that day actually about how Sade was super excited for her first date, and there's also a string of text messages between Maxwell and Sade talking about what time they wanted to meet and where they would meet. There's surveillance footage that shows Maxwell entering the restaurant they plan to meet, the Twisted Fisherman, at around 5 p.m., and then we can see that Sade gets there at around 5:20 p.m. They sit at the bar, they have drinks, and they eat, and then they leave the restaurant at around 6:25. The police interviewed the bartender that served them that night, and they said that the couple seemed to just be casually talking and enjoying each other's company. The pair then appeared to go to a bar downtown called Duke's on Water, and they stayed there until about 9:30 p.m. And at this point, we can see the pair travel to Maxwell's South Milwaukee home, and they stay there from about 9:30 to about 1 a.m. At this point, Sade appears to travel from Maxwell's home about 25 miles north to the River West area of Milwaukee, and that's from about 1:30 a.m. to about 3 a.m. Then from about 3 a.m. to 4:30 a.m., Sade's location appears to be at Warmount Park, which, if you remember, that is where the severed leg was found just 1 day later. From this point, it appears the location shifts just a little bit to the north before Sade's phone finally dies at about 4:35. Then at around 7:30 a.m., we actually have footage from the bus line that runs along the place where Sade's car was found on fire. And from this footage, we can see a person matching Maxwell's description and another pedestrian walking away from the area of the fire. Police were then able to find a different angle of the same interaction between this pedestrian and this person that looks like Maxwell. And this other person, this pedestrian walking next to Maxwell, seems extremely distressed. And he starts yelling and pointing at Maxwell saying, "He did that. He did that." Not only that, but police were actually able to interview this pedestrian, and this woman said that she not only saw Maxwell, but she saw him get out of Sade's car, throw a lighter in the open driver's seat window, and walk away. Security camera from a different bus then picks up Maxwell riding from this area to a destination in South Milwaukee pretty close to his home around 8:45. Within this criminal complaint filed on April 12th, it did state that preliminary tests confirmed that this was Sade's leg. So we do know that these remains do belong to Sade Robinson. During this court hearing, Assistant District Attorney Ivan Vance Corazan stated that the defendant did a tremendous amount of work to try to cover up the crime, including lighting Mrs. Robinson's vehicle on fire. The allegations in this complaint are abhorrent. It is the highest level of violence imaginable. And then after this hearing, Sheena Scarborough, Sade's mom, said this: "Her whole life was so ahead of her. She was so amazing, so beautiful, such a beautiful angel. Everywhere she went, people just admired my baby." A vigil was held for Sade on April 19th of 2024, where her family, friends, community just met and gathered and remembered Sade for the amazing person that she was. Sade's sister spoke during this vigil, and she recounted just how strong her sister was. "She's been through a lot, but she never let it break her. She was the strongest person I know. She was the most beautiful person I know. She never deserved this." During this vigil, they also released pink balloons, which were Sade's favorite color, and I'll try to put some pictures. It just looked so beautiful and such a special way to remember this young woman who was just taken from this planet way too soon. On April 22nd of 2024, Maxwell Anderson pleaded not guilty to the charges put against him, and thankfully he was not let out. He was not able to post his $5 million bond, so he will stay in prison until some kind of conclusion is reached. I failed to mention something very important about the April 22nd hearing. Around this time, it was also discovered that the blood in Maxwell Anderson's house was not actually Sade Robinson's blood. So now police are kind of, and still to this day, I'm filming on April 28th. It's April 28th right now, and police are still kind of reeling. They haven't really declared Maxwell's home a crime scene yet, from what I could tell. The police don't believe that this means that there are more victims, but it kind of opens this whole can of worms for investigators where now they have to try to figure out, like, who does this blood belong to, and is it connected to Sade Robinson? And additionally, I do want to put in here, while I have you guys, Sade Robinson's mom, Sheena, she wants to find all of Sade's body before her funeral. So she put out a call, I think it was yesterday on April 27th, saying that she wants to continue the search at least through the end of the month to try to find all of her so that she can lay her baby completely to rest. So I will let you guys get back to the video. Anderson's supposed to report back to court on May 16th. So I'll try to post either something in the comments or maybe make a shorter video just updating you guys on what's happening throughout this case. I'm sure it will be a long and tedious one, so be on the lookout for that. Sade Carlina Robinson's funeral will be held on May 9th of this year. There is a GoFundMe page set up for helping the family with funeral costs. I'm going to be linking it in the description box below. It will be the first thing in the description box. If you guys feel so inclined, please, please, please donate. I can't imagine having to go through the trauma and the heartbreak of losing a sister, a daughter, a coworker, a friend, and then having to pay for the funeral as well. So if you want to help, please do. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you. Please, please be safe. If you are dating, please, please be safe. Please. I know situations like this sometimes are unavoidable. It's just such a sad thing when you see somebody so beautiful that had such an incredible life at just 19 years old. When you see somebody go through that and then having to see their friends and their family grieve, it's horrible. So please, if you don't get anything else from this video, please be safe. Please be aware. I love you guys, and I want to leave you with this quote from Sheena Scarborough. You remain a voice. Not just you, but all the black and brown girls who remain missing, and for which there is no accountability. God had to take my angel to speak to the universe, to speak to the world.